Welcome, everyone, to possibly the most important 50-50 Women on Boards global conversation yet. Today, we are among groups of women and men who are looking to advance to leadership positions and beyond, and business leaders from around the world who want to continue to accelerate gender balance and diversity on corporate boards and across their organizations. This global conversation kicks off 30 events in 6 countries in the US, UK, Spain, Mexico, Canada, and Greece, beginning tomorrow with 3 events per day. As we navigate through the first global pandemic in over a century, we are trying to reorient ourselves during worldwide disruption and restructuring on every front: political, social, environmental, and economic. Change is often a natural outgrowth of upheaval, and differences can be accentuated and gaps between viewpoints can widen. This is especially true when we become isolated from one another. So this is precisely why the strides we've made in 2021 to bring further awareness to the business and human imperatives of diverse and gender-balanced boards is that much more relevant and urgent. We know firsthand from our knowledge partner McKinsey that COVID-19 has caused women and women of color to leave the workforce at a much quicker rate than men, which impacts the future pipeline. We also know that 40% of people who have left a job have left without another one in place. Minimizing the gap and ensuring that talent continues to rise requires reimagining archaic business practices in order to enable all to succeed. This begins with enlightened, diverse leadership who can cultivate an inclusive culture. Many public companies are turning this awareness into action and leading with intention. And today we shine a spotlight on CEOs and corporate directors who are leading the way. On today's program, we present an inside look at the types of strategies companies are implementing to ensure women and underrepresented groups advance and are provided a path forward. At 50-50 Women on Boards, we focus on 4 unique pillars. We educate women on how to prepare and pursue a private or public board seat. We advocate for diversity and gender balance on boards. We collaborate with like-minded organizations and action groups committed to the mission, and we report on the gender and diversity progress of the Russell 3000 company boards. To start, let's take a look at where we are today by kicking off the conversation with Stephanie Sonnabend, co-founder and chair, and Mally Giro, co-founder and vice chair of 50-50 Women on Boards. Together, they shared a mutual desire to advance women to corporate boards, and in 2010, they founded 2020 Women on Boards, now 50-50 Women on Boards. Welcome, Stephanie and Mally. It's great to see you both together in Boston. I'm delighted we can connect this way again.
And welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you again this year to kick off the global conversation on board diversity. Before we dive into the campaign mission and statistics, on behalf of the entire organization, we want to take a moment to thank our 60-plus chairs and their leadership committees for the incredible work they do to advance the movement. Each one of them shares our passion to advance women at all stages in their career, and they enthusiastically volunteer their time to build awareness for the campaign and their city conversation on board diversity. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause.
Everyone here today plays an enormous and important role in the progress women have made advancing to corporate boards. For those of you in attendance who don't know our story, Mally and I founded 2020 Women on Boards in 2010 to address the lack of women on corporate boards.
And after meeting our initial goal of 20% women on corporate boards of the Russell 3000 companies, we decided rather than aiming for 30% or 40%, we would aim for a bigger and bolder goal, gender parity. With women holding 50% of the company board seats, including women of color, holding at least 20% of all corporate board seats. Our mission remains the same.
Quarterly and annually, we report on the progress women are making to attain board seats. We analyze the board composition of the Russell 3000 index companies with data provided by our partner Equilar. In our directory on our website, we also rank companies as GB, indicating those with gender-balanced boards, 3+, companies with 3 or more women, and companies with 2, 1, and 0 women on their boards. And every year, we applaud the companies that are leading the way. As of June 30th, 2021, our 50/50 Women on Boards Gender Diversity Index research reveals that of the 27,000 board seats on the Russell 3000 Index, women now hold almost 7,000, or 25.5% of the corporate board seats, which means we are finally at the halfway mark to gender balance.
And it's about time.
And the percentage increase from the previous year, when women held 22.6% of the corporate board seats, is the largest year-over-year growth since we began reporting on the Russell 3000. Additionally, 217, or 7% of the Russell 3000 companies have gender-balanced boards, up from 5% a year ago.
When we began our efforts 11 years ago, things were in dire shape, with women only holding 11.6% of the Russell 3000 company board seats. As recently as 2018, half of companies on the Russell 3000 Index had no women board directors, or only one, and today only 4% of public companies have no women on their boards, and 22% have just one woman. In the first half of 2021, 43% of new director positions were filled by women. So, while things are moving in the right direction and at a steadier pace than years past, present projections suggest that if we maintain our average year-over-year percentage rate of change, boards in the U.S. won't hit gender parity until 2032. And that's just not fast enough.
If we take a look at race and ethnicity, the stats are even more sparse. Of those that self-identify, only 12% of board seats are held by women and men of color. We encourage all boards to identify the race of their directors.
I agree, Stephanie. At 50/50 Women on Boards, we ask companies to be transparent by providing reliable diversity statistics and reporting at all levels, especially at leadership and board levels, so that we can disseminate the data. For those of you in the audience who are corporate directors, we encourage you to update your Equilar Board Edge profile and identify your race and ethnicity so we can better assess progress and develop solutions for underrepresented groups. Thank you both for sharing these important statistics. What actions do you believe are needed to get to parity on all boards?
Everyone here today shares a mutual desire and excitement for igniting change. But we're at a tipping point. We all need to commit to make conscious and intentional choices that advance the pace of diversity on boards and continue to advocate for gender-balanced corporate boards.
We also need to keep talking about diversity and equity, not because we want to better represent the consumer population, not because it's mandated or looks good to investors. No, we must advance diversity on boards because valuing, supporting, and modeling diversity creates opportunities that challenge conventional perceptions, ignite creativity, and enriches our conversations and connections.
Well said. Balance is what keeps us moving forward. It's what prevents further disruption. It's why we need balanced leadership guiding our economy and in the seats of power in global business. It's why we need 50/50 women on boards. As we work together to make enormous headway, today we'll hear from admired CEOs and corporate directors who are leading the way to diverse and gender-balanced boards. We have experts from McKinsey and Company and the Harvard Business Review sharing their perspectives. We'll also revisit the progress of our global partners around the world. We have a full agenda filled with best practices and key takeaways for each of you, and we encourage you to engage in the chat to share your thoughts and questions throughout the program. We are going to begin our program with a leader in tech who is hailed as one of the youngest executives to take her company public and is a trailblazer for women. What poised her for success was years of experience at former startups before she went on her own to form Bumble, the dating app where women are emboldened to make the first move. More importantly, she takes pride in creating a company culture that attracts diversity. Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Bumble, Whitney Wolfe Herd.
Thank you so much for having me.
Whitney, welcome. Thank you for joining us from Austin. I want to dive right in by acknowledging that Bumble's board of directors and executive positions are majority female, making it an anomaly in corporate America where women represent 25% of all Russell 3000 company boards. This is an obvious strategy on your part, and we applaud your efforts. What drives your passion and commitment to create and ensure an inclusive culture is represented at every level of the company?
Ultimately, when you look across the spectrum of how women and men have been treated for centuries, women have really never been encouraged to make the first move in their love lives, which inspired Bumble. And how can we expect women to make the first move in their career and to advance in their career if they're not even perceived as equals in their home? And so it's been my sincerest passion and purpose throughout the process of building Bumble to really help calibrate the disparity between the genders when it comes to how we treat each other and how we respect one another. And equality is one of our core values at Bumble, and it certainly cannot be a value if we don't practice that in everything we do. And so we are very committed to gender equality, both at the corporate level and throughout the entire organization, but also as we look at our board, and our board is over 70% women, and we're very, very proud of that.
What has been your strategy to achieve board diversity?
So, the board is such an incredibly important part of the business and the strategy and what the business actually goes and puts out into the world. And if your board is not representative of the communities that you're reaching or targeting, then how can you actually best serve those communities and those customers? And so the strategy has always been very simple: is let's have the voices of our audience reflected on our board. Let's really highlight and elevate these voices that are going to be shaping not only our products, but our customer offerings and the way we approach, biz dev and M&A and corporate responsibility at a whole. And so, elevating a lot of women at the table, it is absolutely seen in our KPIs, and it's reflected in our success as a business.
Have conversations in the boardroom shifted by having more women directors?
Absolutely. I do believe that they are different. And, I have been a part of a board where there were more men than women. And I can say that, and this was former Bumble board, I can say that there is a huge difference when you have a lot of women voices at the table, when you have a lot of women contributing to the future of the business and contributing to thoughtful discussion. It is a different conversation. And I think, it balances the decision-making in a way that maybe a lot of businesses don't benefit from when they have a predominantly single-gendered board.
What fuels your mission to empower women with your company and through Bumble?
Well, our mission is really about creating healthy and equitable relationships. And that is, the most, it's ultimately our guiding light. And we cannot create healthy and equitable relationships for our communities, our customers, if we're not facilitating that internally. So really prioritizing this in our global hiring process, really prioritizing this in the way we approach reviews and pay processes. And so, just being very, very intentional and methodical about, weaving this into everything we do in our operating practices, in how we approach, our global people and culture, arm, and also our board. We're just really practicing what we preach.
Whitney, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Betsy, for having me. And thank you everyone for tuning in today.
Last year, we spoke with global leaders around the world. This year, we spent time gathering information from each of them on how their country's boardroom diversity has progressed over the last year. Throughout the program, we'll share those statistics with you. Let's start by taking a look at what's happening in Nigerian boardrooms.
In Nigeria, Ivana I. Osagi, founder and CEO of the Professional Women's Roundtable, reported improvements in the number of seats held by women on the boards of the top 20 companies listed on the stock exchange at 23.4% this year compared to 20.9% last year. Women in Nigeria, like elsewhere, took on the challenges of working from home and simultaneously supporting their families or households. However, unlike many other countries, women in Nigeria did not have the option of quitting work, even with the great personal cost both mentally and physically. Ivana states, if we can build on the momentum and keep the conversation center stage at the most senior level of corporate leadership, we will see a significant increase in the number of women on boards by this time next year. A lot depends on what we do over the coming months, instead of just waiting to count the numbers come next year.
While we're not at parity yet, and the percentage of chairwomen has dropped and women CEOs has not progressed, the overall progress of women continuing to join boards at an accelerated rate in Nigeria is phenomenal. Now we're going to head to iRobot headquarters in Bedford, Massachusetts, where Heather Spilsbury, our COO and Chief Marketing Officer, is getting ready to interview Colin Angle, Chairman of the Board, CEO and co-founder of iRobot. Also Kieran Smith, Chief Marketing Officer, and Heather Bender, VP of Talent.
Hi, Betsy, and welcome everyone to iRobot's headquarters, where the company invents and creates the future of home robotics. Colin, Kieran, and Heather, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Can you share what you believe are the most fundamental principles for attracting a diverse board?
My philosophy has always been recognize that we need a diversity of opinion in order to make the best decisions. Hire the best people you possibly can for the job. And so the approach to building the iRobot board was to really think about what are the skills we need on the board. And one of the traps you fall into is if you say, well, I'm really great at technology, maybe I'm 8 out of 10. Let's see if we can bring in some more people and get it to 9 out of 10, ignoring the fact you're a 2 out of 10 on marketing or a 1 out of 10 on channel expertise. And so that we developed an explicit process where we looked at the skills we wanted on the board and then created a strategy for filling those skills. And the only thing I required was that we have diverse slates of candidates. I didn't want to see all of one type of person or another. And then with a diversity of skills and a diverse slate, choose the best person. And I could tell every candidate with complete honesty that they were not a diversity candidate. I was trying to find the best person for this job as we chart a path forward.
What Colin put together is like a puzzle, right? Because what we're looking for is by bringing this group of individuals together, he's created a group that is challenging to one another, that brings out better parts of one another and of our executive team as well.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, we always tell corporations that it's important to look outside your network, but also to be really intentional about what you're doing. And so it makes a lot of sense that it's like a puzzle, because it should be something that's built that way, in the sense that you're trying to make sure that you have diversity of thought. I think for women too, it's really important for them to hear what you said about, we ask people who do they know, and what we always tell women is that they need to network. They need to talk to people outside of their network. They need to pitch themselves and advocate for themselves so that they can actually get on a board. And that's when someone raises their hand and says, I know this great candidate who can do X, Y, Z. So I think that's really great for everybody to hear, because that's how you do it. That's how you build diversity on the board. You know, it has to be intentional, and there has to be people that are there to challenge each other in a way that you never thought that they could.
right? And I think it's also important because it's not just looking for people who look like you,
Right.
Who act like you, who've come up like you, and how you build your own personal network and how you advocate for that network and I think that's something that's really important as well as we build out our own personal brands as well.
Yeah.
I think this is then where allyship comes in as well, right? And certainly your organization is helping with that. But when we have more diversity rising up through the ranks of senior leadership teams, up through boards, and we're tapping networks, those women who can be allies, as well as men who have broad networks themselves, that's really where the two coming together, I think, can create something great. If women are really ensuring they're broadening their network, they're making as many connections as possible. Just this week, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who've ended up in new roles, new places, all through knowing someone who knew someone who knew someone. I mean, the transparency of our networks and the ability to really broaden these days, I think, is just unbelievable.
How is iRobot intentionally reshaping the lack of women in the tech sector?
One thing I'd say is great talent attracts great talent. And for me, they're my number one tool to get people to understand that when I talk about what a great place this is, when I talk about what a great culture this is, it's not me. It is because it's the people that I'm surrounded by as well who feel in a very similar way. And that, for us, is what I believe to be probably the most attractive thing about when you come here. You're going to be challenged every day. You're going to learn a lot, but it is going to be an environment that you're going to get a lot from as well.
Employees are certainly our greatest asset when it comes to recruiting, using their network, tapping into them. We, of course, augment that network along with partnerships with specific organizations, both locally and in different parts of the country and different regions around the world to continue to help broaden the pool that we're able to select from. I mean, we know that our employee networks are one of our greatest opportunities to draw and attract more diverse pools of people to bring in. And as I mentioned earlier, though, we partner with other firms and organizations externally as well, just to make sure that we're at Grace Hopper, for example, ensuring that we're looking at women in technology and making those connections, getting our brand out there. We're working with the Society for Black Engineers. Afrotech is a new one that we're engaging with this year. So we are trying to balance, I think, the ability to organically source with some of the external opportunities for partnership. We also have a number of programs just to ensure we're allowing, for the learning and the development, the continued evolution of people's careers, growth of skills. So for women in particular, for example, we have a cohort that goes through an early career program for women. We've partnered with an external company, same with mid-career. And so that's part of what they learn in that program as I've gotten engaged with it. It really is about bringing your voice forward, advocating for yourself, having confidence, raising your hand for opportunities, and recognizing that being uncomfortable means you're learning, and that's okay.
It's a really great point. I think one of the other questions I had for you too is a lot of people talk about their diverse board and their diverse culture, but how are they interrelated? We hear from some CEOs where the culture actually drives diversity on the board and so on and so forth, but I think they probably go hand in hand. In addition to that, and you spoke to this, Heather, it's really about making sure that that's a daily initiative. And how do you do that on your teams and throughout your culture to make sure that it doesn't get lost, and hire the right people that reflect that too, because that's important. And then I think the continuation of that takes work and takes practice.
Yeah, the challenge of building robots and trying to tell their story and trying to develop the way to bring those robots into the marketplace is so cross-disciplinary and benefits from different perspectives that from a very early moment at iRobot, I tried to promote rotation of jobs and promote cross-training of people. And it does require you to spend more time kind of at your edges of comfort because you're constantly being asked to learn something that you frankly were never trained to be able to be good at. And yet, that's where education happens, and that's where we create some just spectacular human beings that can bring different perspectives together, and it's part of our secret sauce.
If you could leave our audience with one thing today, what would that be?
You know, I would make one point. It gets easier. Diversity begets diversity. And so if you're at the beginning of the journey with so many things to change, just start. And, you know, I've seen how my diverse board trickled down and made it easier to attract and build a diverse leadership team and a diverse employee base. Once it is established and embraced, it does grow and germinate.
Thank you all for your time today. This conversation provided insightful key learnings. Betsy?
Colin, Kieran, and Heather, thank you for making me and our Heather feel right at home. Although I was only able to join virtually, I could sense the camaraderie and commitment your team has for empowering diversity of thought across all teams and on your board to ensure the best outcome. And now for another look at what's happening around the world. Let's review boardroom diversity in Japan.
Kaori Sasaki, founder and CEO, eWomen Incorporated, tells us that women now hold 8.8% of the company boards listed in the first section of the Tokyo Stock Exchange, an increase of 1.7 percentage points from last year. However, the percentage of companies with independent women directors is now at 53%, which is up 9%, and exceeds 50% for the first time since research started 10 years ago. The number of companies with more than 2 women external board members is now at 262, which is an increase of 150% from last year. Kaori states, "Due to the revisions of the Corporate Governance Code, I believe the numbers in Japan will increase at an accelerated rate in the next few years. It's an important time for women board directors around the world to support each other, enhance our skills, and to make a difference at each company we serve to accelerate the wave of more women on company boards."
The upward trend shows that women are slowly starting to occupy governance space, and women on boards continue to progress. Our next speaker was named to Forbes' inaugural 2021 CEO Next list and was hailed as one of Fortune's 2020 most powerful women. She was also the first woman CEO of AT&T Business and the first woman of color CEO in AT&T history. She's an independent board member at Franklin Covey, a Dallas Mavericks Advisory Council member, and serves on the President's Advisory Board at Georgia Tech, and an advocate for advancing social justice. Please welcome Ann Chow, CEO of AT&T Business. Ann, thank you for joining us from Texas. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Betsy, it's so lovely to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
With more than 31 years at AT&T in various roles and now CEO leading the company's Business Solutions Unit, a unit that spans more than 30,000 employees who serve nearly 3 million business customers in more than 200 countries and territories worldwide, how do you meet individual and team needs to ensure they thrive in an inclusive culture?
Yeah, there's no question that every business, every organization, every team revolves around its culture, right? The culture drives the norms, the practices, the communications, the tenor of the organization. So the way that I do that is I'm very much out in the field a lot, and in this in this kind of challenging environment, that means a lot of virtual calls with lots of team members and clients all around the world. I think the key thing here is to really listen, right? And to open your mind and open your heart to an understanding of what your people, whether it's your teams or your clients, are dealing with. What are their challenges? What are the things that are important to them, both personally and professionally? And in my mind, building a culture of inclusion is absolutely table stakes in order to grow, in order to evolve, and in order to compete in the modern world.
In an interview with Harvard Business Review's Race at Work with Porter Braswell, you discuss gender, racial, and functional bias and how we have a unique identity and perspective. Knowing that we relate to people and have natural affinities that carry over into professional leadership styles, processes, as well as recruitment, what practical solutions can women and men embrace to change those biases?
Yeah, so Betsy, you hit on a topic that is just absolutely one of my passion points, and that is the topic of understanding bias, and in particular, unconscious bias. And it is very much aligned with how do you build an inclusive culture, and how do you create a sense of belonging for every person and every member of your team. And so, what is bias? First of all, to be human is to have bias. And so, let me just first debunk the myth that bias is a necessarily bad thing. It just simply is. It can be positive, it can be negative, it can be neutral. What we do need to do, however, because we all have both conscious biases, think of biases as preferences, prejudices, points of view, and strong opinions about something, someone, an experience, and they shape our words, they shape our thoughts, and they shape our actions. The risk that we've got in terms of unconscious or implicit bias is that we're not even aware of them, right? We're not even aware that they are enabling us to be effective or not as effective in how we may connect with others or build a relationship. So in my mind, it's not about eliminating those biases, Betsy. It's about reframing them and really kind of taking the first steps to understand your origin story, kind of what is your background, where do you come from, what is the media that you watch, right? Who do you surround yourself with? And really start to unpack that to understand perhaps some of the sources of what your biases are and raise them to the surface. Because once you raise them to the surface, then you can work through them and create, the most high-performing version of yourself, as well as, work to lead and be part of high-performing teams.
Fantastic, Anne. What drives your passion and commitment for building inclusive cultures where you lead and serve?
Thanks for that important question, Betsy. What drives my passion for inclusion and diversity is really simply that it's the right thing to do. The world is becoming a more and more diverse place. With every generation that comes after us is more diverse, right? It's more diverse in terms of culture, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, in terms of identity. And so simply put, my passion is really about enabling next generation leaders who by definition are more and more diverse. What also drives me is that I have two young daughters who are Gen Zers, and there's an expectation that leadership going forward and organizations who have impact and commitment to diversity are those that will thrive.
And what are you doing within your organization and in the tech sector to provide a path for women and underrepresented groups to advance?
Yeah, I'm so proud to work for a company like AT&T, and across AT&T and AT&T Business, we take a multifaceted approach to advancing diversity, inclusion, and ensuring that underrepresented communities have opportunities to develop, grow, and advance. We have over 24 employee resource groups and employee networks. In addition to that, from a leadership perspective, I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the things that we've got going on in my organization, in my unit. We have very explicit mentoring programs and connection programs to facilitate connection between our executive team and the communities and our employees of color, right? To make sure that, again, to my earlier comment, we're creating that connection, creating the opportunity for relationships to be made, whether they're mentoring relationships, coaching relationships, or ultimately sponsorship relationships, right? That help enable and catalyze changes in somebody's career simply by, not just being in the right place at the right time, but really getting to know, key leaders in the business.
What has been your strategy to achieve board diversity?
So my strategy to achieve board diversity has really been multifaceted, but it's really all about people. One of the things that I pride myself on is being a connector. So not only in my day job am I a connector in terms of the products and services that I'm responsible for enabling my customers with, I also view myself as a human connector. And when we think about what we've learned, the lessons that we've learned over this very challenging past year and a half, That is the power of human connection. And in the case of planning a strategy, right, and actions around board diversity, this is really about creating connection and developing connection, connecting different groups of networks with each other. To the earlier comment about bias, we all have the networks of people that we like to spend time with, that we frequently spend time with. And then there are so many other networks of other groups of people out there, other individuals that we may not be exposed to. And they may represent, and they do represent, incredible talent pools for organizations to consider to be part of their boards. And so having a strategy of connection, of linkage, of communication is absolutely, absolutely key. That networking needs to happen not only one-to-one, but organization to organization. And Betsy, let me just take a moment to say thank you to you and 50/50 Women on Boards, because your organization is a connector, right? One would argue maybe that is, in fact, the role that you have. And that's very much a big part of what we're here today to talk about and advance.
Thank you, Ann. Ann, it's been a pleasure watching you lead and serve. You are a force, and we are motivated to continue the movement toward gender parity on boards. Thank you for speaking with us today and supporting 50/50 Women on Boards.
Well, thank you.
I'm now joined by our expert panelists. Throughout the program, we will turn to them to capture their perspective and insight. Please help me welcome Liz Hilton-Siegel, McKinsey's global leader for industry practices with oversight over its 21 global sector domains, and our esteemed 50/50 Women on Boards knowledge partner. And Adi Ignatius, editor-in-chief at Harvard Business Review. Adi oversees editorial operations for HBR Magazine, hbr.org, and HBR's book publishing division. Welcome, Liz and Adi, and thank you for joining us to provide further insight into what corporations can do to advance gender balance and diversity on boards.
Well, thank you.
It's so great to be here with 50/50 Women on Boards and the audience.
Liz and Adi, as we heard from iRobot, Bumble, and AT&T, attracting a diverse board is not mutually exclusive to a diverse workplace culture, and for a company to sustain growth, the two must be interrelated. What is the board's role in fostering corporate culture?
I think the first thing is the board's role in fostering corporate culture is really about setting the tone that it's important. Something that a board can do is ask for an explicit discussion on company purpose. And, the benefit that has, and we're certainly seeing this across many companies, is that it really engages the entire organization in dialogue about what are we here to do and how does that connect to my own sense of purpose. The other thing that a board can do is take the time to make personal connections between board members and the executives, and really understand how the executives in the organization are setting the tone from the top about the company's culture. One of the things that we're seeing happen much more often now is a real emphasis on employee well-being, both in their professional lives and beyond.
Definitely. iRobot said its diverse board brings new perspectives and opinions that enable successful consumer-facing strategies and innovation. How can board chairs and CEOs tap into the strategic potential of a board to help the company solve problems that they might not even know they have?
From my vantage point, the most important thing is building the foundation of the relationships such that the board can collaborate together when there's conflict. And when a board has the most positive outcome is when diverse views are heard and when people are willing to take risks, when the board is moving towards groupthink and someone can say, you know what, I see this from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best boards are diverse in many ways. I think it's important, before you even talk about gender diversity or racial diversity, to talk about subject expertise diversity. It's really important these days to have on your board somebody who understands technology, somebody who understands, cyber risk, and somebody who understands the kind of crisis management, the public-facing side of the company. And then you get into the imperative for, gender and racial diversity. We know that boards who have that kind of diversity, that companies with boards with that kind of diversity perform better than others for obvious reasons and not so obvious reasons. So, I think you need a board that's diverse in all those ways, and you need a chairman who appreciates that and understands how to tap resources, how to connect the board members at appropriate times with the company, people in the company, senior executives who can benefit from that kind of insight. It takes a good board and then a good chairman to appreciate the assets that they have and how to connect them with the company.
Yes, indeed. Whitney does an incredible job balancing it all and has a true desire for women to feel comfortable making the first move in their personal and professional lives. When seeking board positions, are there any shifts taking place that enable women to make the first move versus waiting to be asked?
Yeah. I spoke recently to Dambisa Moyo, who and she's amazing, and she is an author and an economist and has served on a lot of really high-level boards. I know Chevron and 3M and Barclays Bank in the past 12 years. And I actually asked her about this, and she's just said, she doesn't wait to be approached by a headhunter or anyone else to join a board. In fact, that's never happened with her. And yet she has had great success getting on boards. And what she does is, very consciously develop a network, and a particular kind of network. For her, it's been relations with accounting firms, legal firms that advise companies, and, just getting to be known, sort of showing who she is, what her strengths are. And beyond that, the people who want to be on boards who don't even get what boards do. I mean, boards focus mainly on strategy and on hiring and firing CEOs, but then they have these committees that are very engaged in things like compensation and risk and finance. Teach yourself, learn that. Be able as you network, as you meet people, to talk intelligently about what you would do on a board, which committee you would serve on, how you would bring value. So I think you need to be proactive, and you need to build up a network. And if you do well, opportunities can come out of that.
Yeah, this is a really important question. During the timeline of the pandemic, there's been a drop in the percent of first-time directors who are women. So prior to the pandemic, back in 2019, it was as high as 74% of first-time directors were women. It's dropped now over the last couple of years, down about 20 points, down to 54%. So it's definitely not moving in the right direction. I think for a woman who's looking to be a first-time board member, I think one of the things she can certainly do is think clearly about her value proposition in today's context. So what is it that she knows that she could bring to the board that would be a new perspective that's grounded in her own business experience? And then I think the second thing she can do is really reflect on her personal network. And is she taking proactive action to broaden that personal network, to potentially join a group that helps make new executives accessible to folks that are making board placement, and learning how she can potentially contribute to a board in a compelling way.
Ann Chow discussed unconscious bias. She tackles the subject with the understanding that to be human is to have bias, debunking the myth that all bias is bad. This way of thinking cultivates an environment where meaningful conversations can be had to build high-performance leaders and teams. How can leaders and board members address bias?
This issue of addressing board bias is a extremely tricky one. And I think the most important thing is creating an environment where it is possible for one board member to say to another board member, hey, I noticed that you might be looking at this from a certain perspective, and why don't we actually look at it from a different perspective? But it is not it's not easy to get there if there isn't a forum of trust or an understanding that might be a natural dialogue in the conversation. And so perhaps the main point is to start small. Start with biases that might be much more close in to the company's business objectives and purpose. So that you might have a bias around the way in which the company tends to make money, or you might have a bias around the types of growth opportunities that feel more accessible or more appealing. And then you can work from those things that are sort of common ground into other areas of bias that might be more connected to ethnic background or racial background or gender.
Really good point. Thank you so much for that perspective. And now for another look at what's happening around the world, let's review boardroom diversity in India.
Professor Niharika Vora, Vice Chancellor at Delhi Skill and Entrepreneurship University, reveals that women hold 18% of board seats in India, an improvement of 1.2 percentage points from last year. She states, while the numbers are less than 20%, the upward trend, while slow, shows that women are starting to occupy board seats. I hope that company heads will enable female members to express their potential through greater positions of responsibility.
The upward trend shows that women are slowly starting to occupy the governance space. Now let's head to Palo Alto, California to meet our next speaker, who began his 30-year career as an intern at HP Incorporated, and today he is the president and CEO. He also serves as a board director for PayPal, is on the New York Stock Exchange Advisory Council, and volunteers on the Silicon Valley Leadership Group and ESADE Business School boards. Please join me in welcoming to the global stage, Enrique Lores. Enrique, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me here. It's a big honor to be able to participate in this event.
Enrique, you speak about the importance of balancing profitability and purpose. As the CEO, what practices have you put into place to ensure your employees, your customers, and communities are represented?
I think let me start by explaining why I think both things are important. And I think it's both because I think it's the right thing to do for the world. And I think we all want to live a better world for our kids and our grandkids than the world we got. But I think it's also really important for the business to stay competitive. And I think companies that will win in the future will be companies that not only deliver strong financial results, but are seen as companies that are having a positive impact around climate, around people, around human rights, and that really they are recognized because of that.
Currently, women represent 41% of your board members and 36% of new hires. Additionally, 41% of job vacancies are filled by internal employees. What are you doing to provide a path for women and underrepresented groups to advance within the organization?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because it's not only about hiring diverse teams, it's really about growing and developing diverse members of our company. And one of the areas where we dedicate a lot of time is inclusion. We measure inclusion for different groups, and we make sure that diverse groups have a similar or better level of inclusion than other groups. We interview them to understand what they like and what they don't like. When someone leaves, we do an exit interview to understand the reasons for that person leaving. We have special development programs in some cases, like mentorship programs for female executives to help them to grow and to accelerate their careers. So we try to put in place, first, understand what is different in terms of what they value, and then put programs in place to help them to develop and to grow in the company.
In your sustainability report, you discuss investing in talent and doubling the number of Black African American executives and tech representation by 2025. How are you continuing to build an inclusive culture representing other affinity groups?
Yes, I think we use this as an example, but we have initiatives to increase the diversity of the group across many other diversity areas. For example, we also have a pledge to increase the number of female executives in 2030 by 50%. We have initiatives to protect the rights of LGBTQ employees. We have, and really across multiple countries and across multiple groups, we always look for what are the diversity areas that we need to protect that we need to foster and make sure this is where we put the priority of the company.
Wonderful. If the business landscape fully embraced diversity and inclusion in the boardroom, what kind of impact do you think that would have for our society at large?
I think it will have a very positive impact. I think, first of all, I think it will be good for the companies. So I think the business results of the companies will be better. Companies will grow more. They will deliver better products. They will deliver better solutions. So that will be a positive impact for the company themselves. And we announced, for example, in our sustainability report, that in the last 2 years, each year, we generated more than $1 billion because of our sustainability practices. So it's not only we say it's important, we have measured that the results are there. And at the same time, I think this will foster a reduction of the diversity and the inequalities that we see in our societies. We think we will be able to improve in the protection of climate or of nature, which I think is an objective that all of us should have. So both for the companies, but also for the societies will be a very positive impact.
We definitely agree. Thank you, Enrique, for sharing what you are doing at HP and on the boards where you serve. We look forward to following your continued mission for measurable change.
Thank you.
Let's head down to Mexico now.
In Mexico, Gina Diaz Barroso, founder of Dalia Empower Grupo Diarc, noted the number of women on the boards of companies listed in Bolsa de Mexico is nearly 9%. However, in 2020, 2.1 million people became unemployed, and from this total, 1.5 million, or 71%, were women. The Economic Commission sees the excessive workload at home and unpaid care being carried out by women that has led many to abandon their jobs. Gina stated, "There's an increasing global trend in the participation of women on administrative boards, as well as a global trend to boost this participation even more through private or government initiatives. In that sense, an increase could be predicted in Mexico, although it will still be marginal and insufficient."
Like Japan, Mexico is slowly progressing, and we look forward to continuing our partnership to help advance women on boards there. Our next guest has been described as an encouraging and passionate leader. As a 30-year veteran of the consumer products industry, today Mike Hsu is the chairman and chief executive officer of the Kimberly-Clark Corporation, an American multinational personal care corporation that has been producing paper-based consumer products for nearly 150 years. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Betsy.
Mike, you have an impressive resume. Knowing the challenges and triumphs that have emerged over the last 18 months, how has the pandemic reinforced the lost art of empathetic and purpose-driven leadership?
Well, Betsy, from the outset, our response as a company to the pandemic has really centered on, the company's historical value of care. And so we've made, the health and safety of our people our top priority, as well as being able to provide care to our consumers and our customers in this important time as we serve them in our communities. So I'm really proud of how our teams have responded to the situation. As you may recall, operating in this environment, it has a lot of challenges, and they've really kind of worked through a lot of those challenges.
The acronym DE&I assumes that one must lead in that order. Can you share why you believe it's important to lead with inclusion followed by diversity?
Yeah, Betsy, that's a change we made last year, and it came out in the course of our discussions, in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter movement. It triggered a series of internal town hall discussions, and in that process, we felt like, we learned that we had a long way to go in terms of improving our inclusion. Over the years, we've made a lot of progress on diversity, but, perhaps still felt like we could do better on inclusion. And in fact, during one of the town halls, one of our featured speakers said, one of our Black managers said, "Hey, I've been working here a long time, and there's not one day where I felt like I could bring my whole self to work." And obviously, we as management felt like, that's not an environment that we're proud of. And so we really did want to be able to create an environment we could attract and retain diverse talent, and we needed to have a more inclusive culture that recognizes the values and differences in all of our people. And so we did take concrete steps to foster that. The first step being, recognizing that, a manager that's willing to call that out, gives us an idea that, there's something for us to work on. And so we've taken, a whole work plan to kind of have that conversation on a more systematic basis and really changing the behavior of our management teams around the world.
Good move. At Kimberly-Clark, women represent 35% of the management roles globally. What drives your commitment to build an inclusive culture?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is we understand that our path to prosperity and being able to fulfill our purpose rests on building an organization that really reflects our consumer base and our customer base and the environment that we serve. And so, have been very conscious, and this started years ago with my predecessor, Tom Falk, very conscious about working to build a management team that reflects the diversity of the markets that we serve. In fact, I think the factoid I'll share, if you add both gender and people of color, I think it represents nearly 70% of my leadership team kind of is in either of those camps. And so, we still feel like we have a lot of progress to make, but the company has come a long way, and we're really excited about that. And I think it's, that progress is being reflected in our performance.
Excellent. What are you doing to provide a path for women and underrepresented groups to advance within your organization?
Betsy, all the things that you might imagine. I'm really focused on increasing the number of women and people of color as well across our entire company by strengthening our development pipeline, our leadership pipeline from the ground up. I mean, we're doing all the things that you would imagine that we're doing. We're working with leaders to embed inclusion into our retention strategies. We're really fostering inclusion, as I just talked about earlier, and then really focused on growing the diversity of our representation as part of our leaders' performance objectives. And that's kind of embedded in personal objectives for our leaders. And then we're really, over the past year or so, we've instituted mandatory training as part of that inclusion process for team leaders to understand and mitigate unconscious bias in all decisions and interactions. And so those are the things that you would expect. I would also say, to borrow a phrase from another company that I respect, which is, we're also saying we have to just do it, right? And in a lot of ways, we're really focused on providing the opportunity for our female leaders and our people of color, with the right tools and the right opportunities to make them successful.
Mike, thank you for that perspective. We admire what you are doing to advance diversity in the boardroom and beyond.
Thank you.
Adi and Liz, welcome back. Enrique and Mike had some great points to share. Like Ann Chow, they are longstanding employees at their respective corporations, which is almost an unheard of trend today. But it also speaks to a company's culture and its ability to evolve. What can board members and leaders do to ensure searching for diverse candidates is not simply a goal, but rather a way to build community?
I think a lot of boards are rethinking their mission statements. There's so much talk about purpose. I mean, for a while we talked about the purpose, which is a purpose-driven company, and everyone is now. I mean, in a sense, people don't want to work for a company, by and large, that doesn't have a purpose that is bigger than just we're trying to make money. So if you really are serious about the mission, for a lot of companies, it helps not just to think about, all right, what are we trying to do in our little ecosystem, in our company, but what are we doing in the community in which we operate? And I mean, that's how companies used to operate. I mean, that was the expectation. And I'm not saying the good old days were necessarily good, but that was how we thought about a company.
What trends are emerging for building community inside an organization?
Well, I mean, one positive trend is just that the benefit of hybrid working and comfort in terms of making new relationships in a Zoom environment means that you can access talent from all over the world. And so, I think the trend there is just a broadening and expanding of networks that might otherwise have been restricted by geography. And kind of the world is open to you, and so there's more ways than ever that you can seek out talent that might be an appropriate addition to your board.
Excellent point. How can employees empower companies to be more inclusive?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So one of the things I think employees can do to create a tidal wave of inclusion in their organization is sort of show the ropes to their direct manager. I think one of the things that often happens is that a manager may inadvertently, through their conversation, their conduct, be implying, making the assumption that my life is like your life. And what an employee can do is to just create the forum for a conversation about how each of their experiences might be different. That could be by sharing a bit about their own background. That could be by sharing something that happened to them in their home life or on the weekend. But to just create a forum to show a bit of the difference and to slow things down from the day-to-day of work. And when you get into a situation where folks are so focused on the financial results of the company or the requirements of the day, I think we sometimes lose sight of what's happening in the broader view of people's lives. And if an employee finds that that's happening, what they can do is slow the manager down and say, hey, let's talk about the broader context. And that creates an environment for inclusion so that when bigger business challenges evolve, there's more of a foundation of trust on both sides.
Partly, we're in the Great Resignation, and the easiest way is to leave companies that you think aren't doing it right. I mean, that's most companies do exit interviews, and I think part of it is tell HR why you're leaving, and if it has to do with a lack of progress in some of these areas, make that clear.
Thank you for that insight. In Spain, women have also made progress. Let's take a look.
In Spain, Miriam Izquierdo, president of Women Forward Foundation, reports that women hold 27% of the board seats, a 3 percentage point increase from last year. Miriam stated, while the pandemic disproportionately affected women in Spain, because of the pressure for companies listed on the stock exchange to arrive to 40% by the end of 2022, I believe the number of women on boards will continue to increase.
We hope companies in Spain continue to see the positive impact of women on boards and arrive at 40% by the end of next year. Our next guest is Dr. Wanda Austin. She's the CEO of Making Space, Inc., and she's a board director for Chevron Corporation, for Amgen, and Virgin Galactic. And she's the author of Making Space, Strategic Leadership for a Complex World. She's also the former president and CEO of the Aerospace Corporation, the former leading architect for the nation's national security space programs, and member of the NASA Advisory Council. Wanda, welcome. We are so pleased that you could participate in today's conversation.
Well, Betsy, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be in this conversation with you and just applaud you on the progress that Women on Boards has made. I know you're making more and looking forward to making more, but I just want to take a moment to say thank you.
Thank you. Wanda, as an aeronautical and systems engineer, your resume and background are impressive. In your experience, what progress has been made in the energy, industrials, and healthcare sectors?
Well, Betsy, when I started, it was not unusual for me to go to a meeting, walk into the conference room, and I would be the only woman and the only person of color who would be represented in the room. By the end of my career, I was delighted that while I was the CEO of a company, I was working across the table from senior executives who were women and people of color across government, as well as the leadership of some of our companies. So I think we've made tremendous progress.
What is still required for boards in these sectors to make diversity a priority?
I think they have to recognize, just like the E and ESG, that diversity is part of their business success. How do you go to your customers and say, I know what you need, I know that I'm serving your needs, even though I don't have anyone who looks like you in our executive team or on our board, in our boardroom? I think that that lacks credibility. I think what we've also seen is that you get different ideas when you have diverse opinions in the room when you're making decisions. You find that there may be other options that you hadn't considered. And I think as companies recognize this, and more are, they realize that they're missing out on a talent base and a talent pool that could help them succeed.
What new ideas have emerged that enabled companies to advance or alter their consumer perception?
The first of all, the fact that you're acknowledging that there are injustices in our world makes your employees realize that you're not tone deaf, that you do see the world that they live in and are aware of the challenges that they face each and every day and the things that they worry about for their children. The fact that CEOs were saying, I want to sit down and have a conversation with you, help me understand, was huge and really pivotal, I think, to coming up with what else do we need to do? How else can we be better? And I think it was very, very important just for the senior leaders to signal, we think this is important also.
There are currently 1,602 directors, 126 women, and 1,476 men who joined their respective boards in the last century. After more than 20 years of service, what should board tenure look like for companies to stay relevant?
Betsy, I'm a big advocate for term limits. I think that you can have talented people, but when you put them in a situation where there isn't a process for evaluating, first of all, what do we need now? This person may have been exactly the right person that you needed 10 years ago, but what do we need now? And on most of my boards, there is a very serious self-evaluation process and feedback process where we say, you know, what's changed? What skills do we not have represented on the board? Where are we doing well? What else do we need to add? And feedback to each director from your fellow colleagues about what they value in what you bring and what they don't see that they wish you would bring. And that enables a very clear and a valuable conversation so that the Nomination and Governance Committee can then say, okay, clearly this is someone that, you know, has been valuable. We still love them, but at this point we thank and excuse them from the board. It's not an easy conversation, but from a governance perspective, I think it is an essential conversation.
We certainly agree. How would you like to see investment institutions like NASDAQ and the SEC further their business influence to push private and public companies to diversify in meaningful ways?
That's a great question, Betsy. And I applaud the efforts of people like Adina Friedman at NASDAQ, who has said, we can help our investors by making sure that we advocate for transparency regarding diversity on the boards and by making sure that you have a way to compare apples to apples on what companies are doing. I think the regulators also have a role to hold boards accountable for making sure that they really are serving the best interests of their shareholders. And I think it really is important for private equity to also follow this path, because again, your intent here is to make sure that you are meeting your fiduciary responsibilities and benefiting your shareholders by having the very best, very talented, very diverse board that you can.
Thank you for your time today, Wanda, and your perspective for advancing all women, especially women of color. We look forward to following your continued accomplishments, for sure. And now for our final international perspective, let's review diversity on boards in the UK.
Denise Wilson, OBE, Chief Executive, Hampton Alexander Review, noted that women hold 34.3% of the company board seats on the FTSE 350, an increase of just under 4% over the prior year. Denise states, once the scale of attrition has been understood, government and business together will need to boost their efforts and investment in women in the workforce to avoid losing the hard-won gains of prior years. Swift and disproportionate action will be needed to halt further losses, while also supporting women's recovery, re-entry, and onward progression in the workplace. The need to harness the benefits of hybrid working and to vest in working parents equally for both the caring and education responsibilities of the next generation will be a core and critical part of recovery.
The stats are progressing well, and at this rate, the FTSE 350 is projected to reach gender parity by 2026. We are now going to Cleveland, Ohio to visit Progressive Insurance. Progressive made history in 2018 as the first Fortune 500 company to have 2 women in its top leadership roles, both CEO and chairperson. Since then, the company has continued to stand behind its core value of diversity in its culture and on its board. We're delighted to introduce Tricia Griffith, President and CEO of Progressive Insurance, who is with our own Heather Spilsbury.
Hello again, Betsy. We've been chatting about my obsession with Progressive's commercials and how any person or demographic can experience a moment of levity and relatability when watching, which builds brand connectivity, the perfect strategy for selling multiple lines of coverage at any given time in one's life. I imagine this consumer-facing strategy, enabling all to feel kinship with Progressive, is not too dissimilar from your company and board culture. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, because that's exactly how we want our brand to be. And when we think of sort of the construct of our business, we think of who we are, which is our core values, why we're here, which is our purpose statement, where we're headed, our vision, and then how we're going to get there is our strategy. And brand is one of our 4 strategic pillars. And what we really try to do is have a lot of diversity in our characters. So for years, it was Flo, a great, wonderful, dynamic woman, but we also knew we needed more than that. So she made insurance more tangible. But we have her squads. We have Mara and Alan and Jamie. And then we wanted to expand to have others. So for example, Motor, half motorcycle, half man, because when you're a motorcycle enthusiast, you're one with your bike. And Dr. Rick, you become your parents when you buy your first house, which I love. A lot of those are from my parents and what they said to me growing up. But that diversity helps us get to consumers that some want price, some want protection, some want both. And it really is diversity. And I attribute that to our company being diverse as well as our board being diverse. I want different experiences, different philosophies, just different ethnicity, gender, and that helps us to be more innovative.
In an interview last year with Time magazine, you were asked, what type of behavior will you not tolerate on your management team? Your answer was disrespect. Be respectful to everyone. Why do you have such a strong sense of respect for others?
I just feel like there are so many things now where people are so disagreeable. And for me, you can disagree, but you don't have to be disagreeable. Whether it is about, equity or equality or even science, for me, those are conversations and those are disagreements. In fact, every year we have a theme around our ethics and compliance, and this year it is embracing and celebrating disagreement. I love that. I love disagreeing because let's have a conversation, but do it respectfully. In fact, I love that people come to me when I say something that they don't agree with. During a little bit after the George Floyd murder, I had a young gentleman from our customer relationship organization come to me and he said, I heard you say you feel privileged because of the color of your skin. I disagree. I've worked really hard to get where I'm at. And so he made this really great, compelling argument. And I said, let's get on a video conference call. So he and I got on a call and we talked about that. He shared with me he was the first member of his family that went to college. And then he asked me a little bit about my life. I was able to say that I paid my way through school. I had school loans. My mom was a waitress. My dad sold insurance door to door. And in fact, my junior year, my father passed away, so I had to figure out plan B, move from an apartment back to the dorms to get an RA position to pay my way through a state school. And what we were able to do was talk about diversity, talk about the fact that the starting line, everybody's not at the starting line at the same place. And so whether it's gender, ethnicity, able-bodiment, and that's the conversation we had. Had he not felt comfortable disagreeing with what I said, that conversation, that education wouldn't have happened.
That's a great story. I love that.
Thank
It's
you.
more about the debate and really having that conversation to find out what other people are doing and where they come from, which I think is so imperative, whatever part of the business you're talking about, whether it's the board or leadership or management. I think across teams, I think it's important for everyone to feel that way. And that's great that you've set that culture. What's been your strategy to achieve board diversity?
It's really been being a part of selecting board members. Lawton, my chairwoman, and I work together hand in glove to find the right women and people of color for our board. And in fact, oftentimes you might stumble upon someone who's great with your board and great with different skills, and that happened to us. One of our board members was in an elevator, met a woman who is a vice admiral, retired from the Navy, fluent in Russian, cyber expert. So we added a spot because that was so incredible and the need for us, and you want to be open to that and intentional with that.
That's great. We always tell companies to do that. Don't wait for a seat to be open. Add a seat if you need to, and make sure that you're adding that seat because you need that experience. And oftentimes, they do that, but I think that's a strategy that sometimes is missed. So it's great to hear that story.
Thank you.
What are you doing within your organization and the financial service sector to provide a path for women in underrepresented communities?
We are investing a lot, both financially and resource-wise. I could go through so many different areas that we've done it, but I'll name one for you. We have, for the past 7 or 8 years, had what we call a multicultural leadership development program, and we have a cohort of people that solve a business problem. Most of them are people of color, and we give them a problem, they present it to my team, and that cohort gets promoted well in excess of the control group. You have to invest in programs for people to be able to showcase what they can bring to the table. And so we do that often, and we continue to invest millions of dollars in that.
So you create the opportunity for them to present and then allow them to move within the organization.
Yeah, and then I might see somebody that I didn't know before and say, wow, where was she? Where was he? And so that to us has been really brilliant, and we continue to double down on the investment there.
That's fantastic. What's been your experience in terms of joining corporate boards and getting asked to join a board?
I was interested in being on a board long ago in my career, and the phone never rang. Even though my boss, my predecessor at the time, would say, she's great, you want her on your board. The only reason I got on a board before I was CEO was because one of our board members at Progressive had me on his board where he was the chair. When I got the CEO role, it was as if the door opened. I got calls every day. I would say, look below the CEO. I would have been and was a great director as a COO. We have a woman that joined our board, was well below the rankings of the CEO, but she had great technology expertise, blockchain, just super innovative, and she has made me better. She's a young woman who just keeps me sharp, and I don't think she was necessarily sought after because she wasn't a CEO or a CFO, and we have to change that.
To act as the driving force and facilitate change, what do you think the opportunity is for enlightened companies to partner and develop diversity and inclusion best practices?
I think we have to share what we've done. We started our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the early 2000s. We need to share that with other companies. In fact, not too long ago, I was on a panel regarding this topic, and a lot of the competitors of mine were out there listening. I've already had 2 sessions with competitors, helping them formulate the start of employee resource groups in different areas, because that's not something that is a competitive advantage. This is the right thing to do for the country. So I'm out and about speaking about this often because I believe in it, it's my passion, and I believe I have the right platform to be able to help other companies.
Tricia, it's truly been an honor to sit with you today and to listen to your perspective on what drives and motivates you as a leader. It's really inspiring for everybody. Thank you for having us and for supporting 50/50 Women on Boards.
Thank you, Heather. It's been a delight for me to meet you and spend some time with you.
Back to you, Betsy.
Thank you, Tricia and Heather. We heard some meaningful insights and conversations today. Liz and Adi, before we close the program, please share your final thoughts on what Wanda, Tricia, and other speakers had to share.
So we're making a teeny bit of progress already. So why are we making progress? We're making progress because nearly every company is making this a priority. I think the question is, will it remain a priority or will it fade? I mean, we've had moments like this in the past when diversity was an absolute priority, when executive pay was linked to progress in this area, and then that sort of faded away. So I think the question is, whether this will be sustained as a priority for business. I think it's about intentionality. I think you have to, if you really have diverse pools of talent, and I don't mean, tokenism, if you really have diverse pools of talent, then more and more of the open jobs will go to diverse candidates. It's just the way it works, but it involves that intentionality and commitment, on the front end. Throw it back, throw the job search back if you're not seeing that diverse pool, and talk to me when you've got it. So that kind of purposefulness and intentionality is how we continue to make progress.
Yeah, we need to do this, and it takes commitment and persistence. We see time and again, every time we run our survey on the question of the representation of women and other underrepresented groups in executive teams or on boards, we see that the numbers are not moving as fast as we would all hope or assume that they might. And there's no question that it takes absolute conviction and commitment and follow through from the board chair, from the top of the organization, from the CEO, to cultivate candidates and to watch through their progression and to ensure that they are treated with respect, to ensure that the environment is an inclusive one. But more than anything, it's persistence and follow through.
Definitely. Hey, thank you, Liz and Adi, for sharing your perspective. You have given us many tangible takeaways for us all to consider when building inclusive and balanced workplace cultures and boards.
Thank you, Betsy. That was a fun discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Wow, Betsy. We heard from some incredible speakers today who are leading the way to diverse and gender balanced boards. And all of you in the audience are also leading the way by joining today's discussion and taking action. So what's next? How do we all lead the way and advocate for ourselves and for other women? For those of you who are working diligently to accelerate diversity on corporate boards, we invite you to consider these actions right away. Like today's speakers helped visualize for us, search for diverse experience and perspective by partnering with organizations that elevate people of color and underrepresented groups to garner a diverse pool of candidates. Encourage talent mobility so employees have the opportunity to learn new skills and transition into leadership positions. Utilize board renewal and term limits to meet your company's business needs and to create room for diverse candidates. Debate respectfully and create an inclusive workplace culture where individuals can share ideas and concerns openly so their perspectives and voices can be heard. Measure your progress. While some argue that you can't measure social impact, you can, through employee resource groups and their level of engagement, and through self-evaluation to discover sentiment among teams, clients, and customers. But to get honest responses, you must always welcome that feedback. For those of you who aspire to begin your path to the boardroom or are ready now to pursue a board position, we invite you into these 6 actions. 1, learn what skills and experiences boards search for. 2, identify your value-add experience. 3, enhance your digital profiles with targeted skills. 4, map out your current and future visibility in your industry. 5, engage in strategic networking with organizations like ours. And 6, earn recognition for your expertise.
To provide you with the strategic tools to put your plan in place, we are here to help you advance. Beginning in 2022, we are pleased to announce that we're launching a series of educational programs under the umbrella of our Path to the Boardroom program. These year-round courses are designed to support your board pursuit no matter what stage you are in your career. We'll have a course for early, mid, senior level executives and board directors that are focused on intention, cultivation, and activation. We're also launching a hub for alumni to network and access additional content. We'll continue to release our quarterly research reports, and we'll be updating our directory with additional access to active Russell 3000 public company information, including director data. We look forward to continuing the conversation as we build this amazing community of people who are looking to accelerate their careers, pursue board positions, build allyship, and advocate for one another. So with that said, I'd like to bring Betsy back.
Thank you, Heather. Those are great ways for women and advocates of women to get involved for the purpose of advancing diversity on boards. We made it to 25.6% women on boards, but we have a long way to go. It's not enough to have just one woman or one diverse candidate applying for these positions. More must be done to achieve 50% women and at least 20% women of color to serve on corporate boards. That's a big goal. And while we have made measurable progress, now is not the time to slow down. Corporations in the top quartile of board diversity are outperforming the market by over 20%, and they are doubling down and improving their diversity at even greater rates. And at the same time, corporations in the bottom quartile are sliding backwards in their diversity. Some say they can't make diversity a priority during an economic crisis. Well, the irony is, focusing on diversity and inclusion are the very strategies that could help them move forward. This is where we can effect the greatest change. You can be a part of this tremendous work ahead of us. Be an ally, be an advocate for yourself and others. Advance diversity on your own board, tell the story of your success, and pay it forward. Balanced boards are a business imperative, but to get there, we must do it together. Your voice matters. Thank you for participating in today's global conversation on board diversity. We look forward to seeing you at our 30 city and state events that follow over the next 2 weeks. Each event begins with a VIP panel session with regional CEOs and board directors who are leading the way to diverse and gender-balanced boards. They will share practical tips and key takeaways. Following the panel, you'll have the opportunity to participate in networking sessions based on your career level or topic of your interest, led by an experienced corporate director coach. And we have 2 interactive workshops in December: Get on Board workshop for board-ready women and Path to the Boardroom for early to mid-career women interested in mapping their future boardroom pursuit. All can be found on our website. On behalf of all of us at 50/50 Women on Boards, we look forward to staying connected with you, driving the movement toward gender balance and diversity on corporate boards. Thank you. Thank you to our remarkable speakers today, and thank all of you in the audience for participating. We'll see you at our 30 events starting tomorrow in Dallas.